Commander Jake Morrison stood at the observation window of Federation Station Alpha 7, watching alien ships move through space like glowing dots against the black. 6 months ago, he never imagined he would be here, representing Earth among creatures from distant worlds. The station was huge, bigger than any city back home, with corridors that stretched for miles and rooms that could hold thousands of beings. Earth had joined the Galactic Federation only recently. The aliens had been polite but distant. They called Earth a Class 12 death world, which meant it was too dangerous for most alien life. Jake had seen their faces when they learned about Earth's weather, predators, and diseases. They looked at humans the way people might look at survivors of a plane crash, with a mixture of respect and fear. The Federation was made up of peaceful species. They had been trading and talking for thousands of years without major wars. Their ships were beautiful and clean. Their weapons were mostly for show, and their conflicts were settled through long discussions and careful agreements. They seemed to think violence was something primitive species did before they learned better ways. Jake's team was small. Dr. Lisa Carter studied alien biology and helped with translation problems. She was smart and curious, always asking questions that made the aliens uncomfortable. Captain Tony Rodriguez was a Marine who had fought in 3 wars on Earth. The aliens avoided him after learning about his military background. They seemed to think soldiers were relics from humanity's dark past. Most days, Jake felt useless. The Federation gave them small jobs like checking trade agreements or attending cultural meetings. The real decisions happened in rooms where humans were not invited. Jake understood the message. Earth was new, primitive, not quite trusted yet. That changed on a Tuesday morning when Ambassador Zethka requested an urgent meeting. Zethka was from the hegemony, a species that looked like giant spiders but walked upright on 4 legs. The hegemony controlled many of the galaxy's trade routes and had more influence than most other species. They rarely spoke to humans directly. Jake met Zethka in Conference Room 12, circular space with walls that could show images from anywhere in the galaxy. Lisa and Tony came with him. Zethka's translator box made clicking sounds before speaking. In perfect English, "Commander Morrison, I apologize for the abrupt meeting, but we face a crisis that requires immediate discussion," Zethka said. The spider-like aliens' movements seemed nervous, which was unusual. The hegemony were known for being calm and careful in all situations. "What kind of crisis?" Jake asked. Shap activated the wall display, showed a map of the galaxy with thousands of colored dots, representing different worlds and species. A section of the map was covered in red, and that red area was growing. "The Vrex swarm," Zethka said. 3 years ago, they appeared at the edge of our territory. We thought they were just another new species seeking membership in the Federation. We sent diplomats to make contact. The display changed to show recorded messages. Jake watched alien diplomats in fancy clothes approaching strange dark ships. The ships looked organic, like they had been grown instead of built. "The Vrex did not respond to our communications," Zethka continued. "Instead, they attacked. Our diplomats never returned. Then they began expanding, consuming everything in their path." The images that followed made Jake's stomach turn. Worlds that had been green and full of life were now gray and twisted. Cities had been replaced by strange, hive-like structures that pulsed with dark energy. The few survivors described creatures that moved like insects but fought with terrible intelligence. "How many worlds have they taken?" Lisa asked. 47 Federation colonies, 12 major trade hubs. 3 hegemony home systems, Zethka replied. "They do not negotiate. They do not retreat. They consume organic matter and convert it into more of their kind. Every victory makes them stronger." Tony leaned forward. "What do your military forces say?" Zethka made a sound that the translator interpreted as bitter laughter. "Our combined fleets have fought them 17 times. We have never won a single engagement. Their technology adapts to our weapons within hours. Our energy beams that once cut through starship armor now barely scratch their bioshields." The display showed battle recordings. Jake watched as beautiful Federation ships fired streams of bright energy at dark, writhing Vrex vessels. The alien weapons seemed effective at first, but after a few minutes they began doing less damage. The Vrex ships moved like living things, healing damage and returning fire with weapons that seemed to grow from their holes. Our strategies are based on millions of years of peaceful contact, Zethka explained. We use precise strikes, defensive formations, and coordinated retreats. The Vrex respond by adapting and overwhelming our positions with numbers we never expected. Jake studied the tactical displays. The Federation fought like people who expected their enemies to follow rules. They used formations that looked perfect in simulations but fell apart when faced with an enemy that ignored conventional tactics. "Why are you telling us this?" Jake asked, though he was beginning to understand. Zethka's 4 eyes focused on him directly. Because desperate times require desperate measures. The Federation Council has authorized me to make a formal request to Earth for military assistance. The room went quiet. Lisa looked shocked. Tony's expression didn't change, but Jake saw his hands tighten slightly. "You want human soldiers," Jake said. "We need beings who understand violence, not as a failure of diplomacy, but as a tool of survival," Zethka replied. "We need warriors from a world that produces fighters instead of philosophers. We need Deathworlders." Jake felt a strange mixture of pride and sadness. For months, the Federation had treated humans like dangerous primitives who needed to be carefully watched. Now, they wanted that same primitive nature to save them. "What kind of assistance are you requesting?" Jake asked. "Everything," Zethka said without hesitation. "Soldiers who can fight an enemy that adapts to conventional tactics. Engineers who can build weapons the Vrex have never seen. Strategists who think like predators instead of prey." The display showed more images of Vrex expansion. Red dots spread across the map like a disease, consuming world after world. "If we cannot stop them here, they will eventually reach your solar system," Zethka added. "This is not just our war anymore." Jake looked at Tony and Lisa. Tony nodded slightly. Lisa looked frightened, but determined. "I'll need to contact Earth immediately," Jake said. "How long will that take?" Zethka asked. "For a message to reach Earth, about 6 hours. For a response?" Jake thought about how Earth's governments would react to this request. "Maybe a day or two. We may not have much time," Zethka warned. "Long-range sensors show Vrex scouts probing our outer defenses. They are preparing for another major offensive." Jake stood up. "Ambassador, I can promise you this. If Earth decides to help, we won't send diplomats or observers. We'll send people who know how to fight." Zethka's translator was quiet for a moment before responding. "That is exactly what we need." As Jake left the meeting room, he thought about what would happen next. Earth had been looking for a way to prove itself to the galaxy. Now they had their chance. And it was exactly the kind of chance humans were built for. The Deathworlders were about to show the galaxy what they could do. The message from Jake Morrison reached Earth on a Wednesday morning. Within 6 hours, every major government on the planet knew about the Vrex threat. Within 12 hours, emergency sessions were being held in capitals around the world. By Thursday evening, Earth had made its decision. General Patricia Hayes watched the orbital platforms around Earth come alive with activity from her command station above the Pacific. Ships that had been carrying cargo were being converted into troop transports. Mining vessels were fitted with weapons. Factory stations that normally built civilian equipment began producing military hardware around the clock. The response surprised even Patricia. She had expected debates, delays, and careful planning sessions that would take weeks. Instead, Earth reacted like a kicked anthill. Every nation contributed what they could. Countries that had been arguing for decades suddenly found ways to work together. Admiral Steve Collins commanded the hastily assembled battle fleet from his flagship. The New York, it was not the most advanced ship in Earth's Navy, but it was tough and reliable. Round him, dozens of other vessels prepared for departure. They were not the sleek, beautiful ships the Federation used. Human ships looked like tools, built to work hard and take damage. Dr. Kevin Walsh worked in the science. Section. Studying every piece of Rex technology the Federation had managed to recover. Most of it was damaged or incomplete, but Kevin was used to working with limited information. He had spent years figuring out alien technology with nothing but fragments and guesswork. The first wave of human forces left Earth orbit on a Friday morning. They traveled in converted cargo haulers and repurposed mining ships, vessels that looked rough compared to Federation standards, but could carry huge amounts of equipment and personnel. Each ship was packed with soldiers, mechanics, engineers, and enough supplies to establish a forward base. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Foster led the ground forces. Her troops were a mix of Marines, Army Rangers, and Special Operations veterans from a dozen different countries. They carried weapons that the Federation considered primitive, rifles that fired metal bullets instead of energy beams, grenades filled with chemicals and explosives, flamethrowers that could turn enclosed spaces into furnaces. The human fleet reached the war zone 2 weeks after leaving Earth. Their first stop was Kepler 438c. It's a mining world that had been overrun by the Vurex months earlier. Federation forces had tried to retake it 3 times without success. Orbital bombardment had failed to damage the hive structures the Vrex had built on the surface. Amy Foster studied the tactical reports while her ship approached the planet. The Federation had attacked with precision strikes, trying to avoid damaging the colony infrastructure. They had used energy weapons that were supposed to be clean and efficient. None of it had worked. The aliens fight like they're afraid of making a mess, Amy told her officers during the mission briefing. That's not how you deal with an infestation. The human assault began at dawn, planet time. Instead of careful orbital strikes, human ships moved into low atmosphere and began dropping soldiers directly onto the hive structures. Amy's Marines landed in the middle of the largest complex, using jetpacks and parachutes to reach the surface while human gunships provided cover fire. The Verks were ready for another Federation attack. They were not ready for humans who jumped into their tunnels carrying flamethrowers and explosives. The creatures were fast and strong with natural armor that could deflect energy weapons. But human bullets were different. They were solid metal moving at high speed, and they punched through Vrex armor like it was plastic. Sergeant Carlos Martinez led his squad through a tunnel complex that would have terrified most Federation species. The passages were narrow, dark, and filled with organic growths that seemed to watch them move. Carlos had fought in urban warfare on Earth. This was just another building that needed to be cleared. Contact front, one of his soldiers called out as Vrex warriors rushed toward them from the darkness. The creatures moved on 6 legs and had claws that could cut through steel. They screamed as they attacked, a sound that was supposed to freeze their enemies with fear. Carlos and his men opened fire with automatic weapons. The sound echoed through the tunnels like thunder. Vrex bodies hit the ground as solid bullets tore through their armor. When the creatures got too close, the humans used grenades. When the tunnels filled with smoke, they switched to Lamama. The battle lasted 3 days. Human forces fought through kilometer after kilometer after kilometer of tunnel, systems burning out every hive chamber they found. When Vrex drones tried to swarm their positions, the humans responded with area, weapons that killed everything in a 50-meter radius. What shocked both the Vrex and the watching Federation forces was how humans dealt with casualties. When soldiers were wounded, their comrades carried them out under fire. When positions were overrun, humans fought to the last man instead of surrendering. When cornered, they used explosives to take their enemies with them. Captain Tony Rodriguez led a demolition team into the deepest part of the hive complex. Their mission was to destroy the central breeding chamber, a massive organic structure that produced new Vrex warriors. The chamber was protected by thousands of drones. The approach tunnels were designed to funnel attackers into kill zones. Tony's solution was typically human. Instead of fighting through the tunnels, his team used mining charges to blast new passages through the rock walls. They avoided the traps by ignoring the established routes entirely. When they reached the breeding chamber, they planted enough explosives to collapse the entire complex. The explosion could be seen from orbit. It destroyed not just the breeding chamber, but half the mountain the hive had been built inside. Virex drones across the planet began retreating toward their ships, their coordination broken by the loss of their command center. Dr. Kevin Walsh studied the aftermath from his laboratory ship in orbit. Federation scientists had spent months trying to understand Virex technology without making any real progress. Kevin's approach was more direct. He examined how human weapons affected Virex materials, looking for weaknesses that could be exploited. Their bioarmor adapts to energy frequencies. Kevin explained to Admiral Collins, but it can't adapt fast enough to kinetic impact. A bullet hits too fast for their defensive systems to adjust. More importantly, Kevin discovered that human tactics were confusing the Virex hive mind. The creatures had evolved to fight enemies that followed predictable patterns. Federation forces used formations and strategies that were logical and efficient. Human forces used whatever worked. Even if it seemed random or wasteful, the victory at Kepler 438c was the first time. Federation forces had successfully retaken a world from the Virex. The news spread through the UHS faster than light-speed communications. Species that had been preparing to evacuate their colonies suddenly began asking for human military advisors. Ambassador Zethka contacted Jake Morrison with what sounded like relief in the alien's translated voice. "Your people fight like nothing we have ever seen," Zethka said. "The Virex are retreating from 3 different systems." Jake looked at the tactical displays showing human forces advancing on multiple fronts. Earth had sent more than soldiers. They had sent engineers who built defenses the Virex couldn't adapt to quickly enough. They had sent strategists who thought like the predators humans had always been. "This is just the beginning," Jake replied. "Earth is sending everything we have." As more human ships arrived from Earth carrying fresh troops and new weapons, Jake realized something important had changed. The galaxy was no longer looking at humans as dangerous primitives who needed to be contained. They were looking at humans as the people who might actually win this war. The Deathworlders had proven they belonged among the stars, and they had done it by being exactly what they were. News of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within days, every species in the Federation knew that the humans from the dangerous little world called Earth had done something no one else could do. They had beaten the Virex in direct combat and forced them to retreat. Dr. Lisa Carter found herself busier than she had ever been in her life. Scientists from dozens of different species wanted to understand how human tactics worked so well against an enemy that had seemed unstoppable. She set up her research lab on Federation Station Beto 12, closer to the war zone, where she could study both human and Virex behavior in real time. The answer, Lisa discovered, was written in Earth's history. Every species in the Federation had evolved on worlds that were relatively safe and stable. Their home planets had weather that rarely changed, predators that were not too dangerous, and diseases that were manageable. Evolution on these worlds moved slowly and peacefully. Earth was different. Earth was a world that had tried to kill everything living on it for billions of years. Ice ages, asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, and climate changes had wiped out most life forms multiple times. The creatures that survived were the ones that could adapt quickly, fight hard, and never give up. Humans were the final product of this brutal process. They had not just survived on Earth, they had conquered it. They had learned to fight diseases, predators, natural disasters, and each other. Most importantly, they had learned that sometimes the only way to survive was to be more dangerous than everything trying to kill you. Captain Tony Rodriguez was learning this lesson applied to space warfare as well. He led a joint operation with Hegemony warriors to retake the critical trade hub at Wolf 359. The Hegemony soldiers were skilled fighters, but they fought like duelists with honor and precision. They expected their enemies to follow the same rules. The Virex did not follow rules. They swarmed like angry insects. They used suicide attacks without hesitation, and they adapted their tactics constantly. The Hegemony warriors, for all their skill, were not prepared for an enemy that fought dirty. Tony's Marines were different. They had grown up on a world where everything from bacteria to hurricanes was trying to kill them. They understood that survival was more important than honor, and winning was more important than fighting fair. The battle for Wolf 359 lasted 6 hours. Tony's combined force approached the station using a tactic that horrified the hegemony commanders. Instead of a careful, organized assault, the humans used what they called a full-court press. Every available ship attacked from every possible angle at the same time. The Vurex defenders tried to adapt to the human attack pattern, but there was no pattern to adapt to. Human ships appeared from directions that should have been impossible, using asteroid fields and debris clouds as cover. They ignored traditional formation rules and attacked wherever they saw opportunity. Corporal Betty Williams led her squad through the station's maintenance tunnels, while the main battle raged in the corridors above. The hegemony had not even considered using the service areas, but humans were comfortable fighting in small, dangerous spaces. Betty's team moved through air ducts, power conduits, and waste processing areas that would have been impossible for larger alien species to navigate. They emerged behind Vrex positions and attacked with weapons the aliens had never seen before. Shotguns loaded with special ammunition that spread metal fragments in wide patterns. Grenades that released clouds of burning chemicals. Close combat weapons designed for fighting in spaces too small for energy weapons. The Vrex had adapted too. Counter-Federation energy weapons, but they had no defense against a human with a combat knife and the willingness to use it. Betty's squad cleared 3 decks of the station using tactics that would have been considered brutal by Federation standards, but were just good sense to humans who had learned warfare on Earth. Colonel Pete Baker's combat engineers provided the technological surprise that broke Vrex resistance completely. While Federation scientists had spent months trying to understand Vrex technology, Pete's team took a more direct approach. They built weapons specifically designed to destroy Vrex bioarmor using principles learned from Earth's military history. The solution was embarrassingly simple. Vrex bioarmor adapted to energy weapons by changing its molecular structure to absorb or deflect specific frequencies. But it could not adapt to kinetic weapons that hit with enough force to shatter the armor entirely. Pete's engineers developed orbital bombardment systems that fired solid metal rods from space. The rods were simple, cheap, and impossible for Vrex defenses to stop. They hit targets on planetary surfaces with the force of nuclear weapons, but without the radiation or complex technology that the Vrex could adapt to counter. Navy Captain Rachel Johnson discovered that her experience with submarine warfare on Earth translated perfectly to three-dimensional combat in asteroid fields. She led a squadron of human ships in hit-and-run attacks against Vrex supply convoys. Using techniques developed for hunting enemy submarines in Earth's oceans, Rachel's ships would hide in the shadows of asteroids, completely powered down and invisible to Vrex sensors. When enemy convoys passed through the area, the human ships would emerge suddenly, attack with everything they had, then disappear back into the asteroid field before the Vrex could organize a response. The key breakthrough came when Dr. Kevin Walsh's research team discovered something that changed everything. The Vrex hive minds that coordinated their forces were vulnerable to specific electromagnetic frequencies. It was not a sophisticated weakness that required advanced technology to exploit. It was the kind of brute force solution that came naturally to a species that had learned to kill with rocks and pointed sticks. Kevin's discovery was accidentally made during a battle near Proxima Centauri. Human communication equipment, damaged in combat, began broadcasting on emergency frequencies. The effect on nearby Vrex forces was immediate and dramatic. Their coordination broke down completely, their adaptive responses became chaotic, and for the first time since the war began, Vrex forces retreated not because they were losing, but because they were confused and afraid. Human ships across the war zone began broadcasting these frequencies during combat. The results were better than anyone had hoped. Vrex formations that had seemed unstoppable suddenly became disorganized mobs. Their ability to adapt to human tactics disappeared when their hive minds could not function properly. Major Danny Lee led the assault on the Vrex stronghold at Kepler 4 for to be using this new weapon. His combined human and Federation force approached the heavily defended world while broadcasting the disruption frequencies at maximum power. The Vrex defenders, cut off from their central coordination, fought as individuals instead of as a unified force. The battle that should have taken weeks was over in 3 days. Rex forces that had held the planet for over a year abandoned their positions and fled to the outer system. It was the first time in the war that the Rex had retreated from a world they considered strategically important. Ambassador Zethka contacted Jake Morrison with what the translator could only describe as amazement. "Your species has accomplished in months what we could not do in years," the hegemony diplomat said. "How is this possible?" Jake looked at the tactical displays showing human victories across a dozen star systems. The answer was simple, but he was not sure the peaceful Federation species would understand it. "We come from a world that spent 4 billion years trying to kill us," Jake replied. "We learned to fight back, and we got very good at it." As more reports came in from the front lines, Jake realized that humanity had found its place in the galaxy. They were not just another species seeking trade agreements and cultural exchanges. They were the galaxy's immune system. The ones who could respond to threats that peaceful diplomacy could not handle. The Deathworlders had proven that. Sometimes the best defense against monsters was to send bigger monsters. The location of the Rex Prime Hive had been a mystery for 3 years. Federation intelligence had searched dozens of star systems without finding the central command that controlled the entire swarm. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: human prisoners of war who had been captured during the early battles. Lieutenant Cooper had been missing for 2 months after his transport was destroyed near the Vega system. When he finally made contact with human forces, his report changed everything. Instead, they had tried to study them, attempting to understand how Deathworld creatures could fight so effectively. Mike had escaped during a prisoner transfer and hidden on an asteroid for weeks, surviving on emergency rations and recycled water. During his captivity, he had observed Rex communication patterns and learned the location of their primary base. It was built around a captured Federation world called Haven, deep in what had once been hegemony space. The Rex Prime Hive was more than just a command center. It was a massive biological construct that had grown around the entire planet like a shell. Millions of Rex drones defended it, and its location at the center of Rex territory made any attack seem impossible. Previous Federation attempts to reach it had failed with complete loss of life. Admiral Steve Collins looked at the intelligence reports and knew this would be the most dangerous mission humans had ever attempted. The Prime Hive was protected by every Vex ship in the galaxy, and the approach would require traveling through hundreds of light years of enemy territory. Worse, any delay would give the Vrex time to relocate their command center. The battle plan was audacious in its simplicity, and completely human in its willingness to accept terrible casualties for victory. A combined Federation and human fleet would approach the Rex Prime Hive in 3 waves. Federation ships would engage the outer defenses and draw away as many Rex defenders as possible. Human heavy cruisers would break through the middle defensive ring and establish a beachhead in orbit around Haven. The final phase would be carried out by volunteers in ships loaded with enough explosives to crack a small moon. These vessels would ram directly into the Prime Hive structure while broadcasting the electromagnetic frequencies that disrupted Vrex coordination. It was a suicide mission, and everyone involved knew it. General Patricia Hayes coordinated the assault from the command ship Destiny. Positioned at the edge of the Haven system where she could maintain communication with all 3 attack groups, she watched the tactical displays as the largest space battle in galactic history began to unfold. The first wave consisted of Federation ships from every member species, hegemony cruisers, Centauri destroyers, and vessels from a dozen other worlds. Approached the Vrex defenses in perfect formation. Their weapons lit up space like fireworks as they engaged millions of Rex drones and bioships that swarmed out to meet them. Captain Paul Anderson commanded one of the Federation ships in the first wave. His crew was mixed human and alien, working together with a coordination that would have been impossible before the war. When Vrex biofighters broke through their defensive fire, human gunners responded with the rapid, instinctive reactions that came from evolving on a dangerous world. The second wave arrived as planned, just as Vrex forces were fully engaged with the Federation fleet. Human ships, built for durability rather than beauty, smashed through the enemy formations like hammers. They ignored elegant tactics in favor of overwhelming firepower and the willingness to take damage. That would have disabled more delicate vessels. Major Chris Williams led one of the volunteer ships in the final assault. His vessel, the Texas, had been a cargo hauler before the war. Now it was packed with explosives, electromagnetic broadcasting equipment, and a crew of humans who had volunteered for a mission they knew they would not survive. The approach to the Prime Hive was a nightmare of defensive fire and swarming drones. Human ships took hits that would have destroyed Federation vessels, but kept flying through willpower and redundant systems. When their weapons were damaged, they used their ships as weapons. When their shields failed, they relied on armor and luck. Commander Sandra Taylor's ship, California, was the first to reach the Prime Hive structure. The biological construct was larger than anything humans had ever seen, a living city that pulsed with alien energy. Sandra's crew flew their ship directly into one of the main arteries, disappearing into the organic maze while broadcasting disruption frequencies at maximum power. The effect was immediate and devastating. Across the entire battle zone, Vrek's coordination began to break down. Ships that had been moving in perfect formation suddenly collided with each other. Defensive positions that had been impregnable became confused and ineffective. More human volunteer ships followed Sandra into the Prime Hive, each one carrying enough explosives to destroy a city block. They flew deep into the biological structure, past defenses that were no longer functioning properly, and detonated their charges in the most critical areas they could find. The destruction of the Prime Hive took less than an hour, but the effects lasted for days. Without central coordination, the Vreks swarm fragmented into thousands of isolated groups. Some tried to continue fighting, but without the hive mind to guide them, they were easily defeated by Federation forces. Others simply fled to the empty spaces between stars, no longer a threat to anyone. The cost had been enormous. Nearly half the human volunteers did not return from the Prime Hive assault. The Federation fleet had suffered heavy casualties. But the war was over, and the galaxy was safe. In the aftermath, everything changed for humanity. The Galactic Federation offered Earth's full membership and a permanent seat on the governing council. Species that had once avoided humans now requested human military advisors and protection agreements. The death world that had once been considered too dangerous for civilized contact became the most important world in the galaxy. Ambassador Zethka personally apologized to Jake Morrison for the Federation's initial treatment of humanity, the hegemony. Diplomat admitted that peaceful species had made a dangerous mistake by believing that their advanced technology and sophisticated diplomacy made them superior to more primitive cultures. We forgot that peace must sometimes be defended by those willing to fight for it, Zethka said. Your species remembered what we had chosen to forget. Dr. Lisa Carter established the first Human Xenobiology Institute, working to ensure that future first contacts would not repeat the Federation's mistakes. Her research showed that death worlds like Earth might be rare, but they served an important purpose in the galaxy. They produced species capable of responding to existential threats that peaceful war diplomacy could not handle. The galaxy's perspective on warfare changed completely. Federation military academies began teaching human tactics alongside traditional strategies. The concept of acceptable casualties, once considered barbaric, was recognized as sometimes necessary for survival. Most importantly, the idea that some enemies could not be negotiated with became accepted wisdom. Human ships began patrolling the galaxy's borders, watching for new threats. Human soldiers trained Federation forces in combat techniques that emphasized adaptability over precision. Human engineers designed defensive systems that could respond to enemies that broke the rules of civilized warfare. Jake. one readdress that we're all we're wrong. With locals of war. In Federation space, below him, the recreation areas were filled with children from dozens of different species, all playing together under the protection of human and alien security forces working side by side. The Deathworlders had answered the galaxy's call for help, and in doing so, they had become something more than warriors. They had become guardians, protectors of a peaceful civilization that had forgotten how to protect itself. Earth's children had found their purpose among the stars, ensuring that the gentle species of the galaxy would never again face extinction, because they had forgotten that sometimes peace required those willing to embrace violence. The humans had proven that being dangerous was not the same as being evil, that sometimes the best way to preserve peace was to be very good at war.